change can be used as a kind of a verb or a noun. For me, the definition of change is a shift to something different, something new, but not necessarily new, right? You can kind of change back to something. I think it depends upon what that change is, right? So, you know, I think probably the most significant change I've had in the past 5 years is moving from California to Pennsylvania. And with that change, I was pretty excited about it because I was, you know, had a new job, was employed full time, changing scenery. So, you know, I kind of tackled that head on. You know, I planned for the change, I planned for the move, and executed the move. So, you know, I think it depends whether or not you're looking forward to the change, or you're kind of scared about the change, or nervous or anxious about the change. I think personal changes that you don't expect, so like changes in relationships, right? I think those challenge everybody. When you lose friends, if you break up with a girlfriend or boyfriend, you know, those types of personal changes I think are more difficult. I think if the change has already taken place, you have to be realistic about it, right? And say, well, this is the way it is, and I have to go along with it. And so, I mean, if I'm going to classify myself as an early adopter or a late adopter, I would kind of classify myself as an early adopter, just because that's, again, you have to take I try to take a realistic approach and say, this is just the way it is, and, you know, try to make the best of the situation, whether it's bad or good situation. I think it's good to have some empathy in the situation, right? To understand where they're coming from, because it depends what my role is. If my role is to kind of to help them adopt the change, it's good to understand their perspective, and I think only when you understand their perspective can you bring them into the change. Can you help them understand the change, or at least help them adopt the change. The people who are laggards are not the people who are affecting change. They're the people who are affected by change, right? But you can look at you know, if you're using CEOs as an example, right? You can look at maybe how they deal with change, maybe governmental regulations, right? They don't want those regulations to occur, and so they're resistant to those changes as well, for whatever reason, right? But they're resistant to those changes. So I would say how you behave to change is kind of your role in that change, whether it's being change imposed upon you, or whether you are the one affecting, or you are the one controlling that change. Well, I think you have to have, or at least be able to display confidence over what you're teaching. I think you also, I mean, you know, what you said about empathy, I think that's also a good thing to have, right? I think any good teacher, whether it's science or humanities, I think they need to have empathy. I think they have to understand that the students are in a class. The students are all different. They're going to have different educational backgrounds. They're going to have different levels of understanding coming into the class, and they're going to have different abilities as they go through the class. And so not every student is going to be a star student and understand things right away. A professor or a teacher has to be able to realize that and deal with it. And so professors have to be empathetic and patient, certainly, in order to be effective. Because if a teacher gets impatient with their students because they're not understanding things easily enough, it's not necessarily the student's fault, right? It could be the teacher's fault as well. But you know, I think there's that a teacher needs to have relaxed expectations of what their students can do and what their students are enthusiastic about. If I thought the change was a good idea or would benefit the student, yeah, I think I would encourage them. I would, try to put them in touch with the right contacts, the right people who could help them implement that change. If I felt the change was not a good change, I'd probably try to recommend something else. I wouldn't necessarily. It depends what it is, right? If a student came to me with a research project, right, for a chemical synthesis class, and they said, "Professor Unger, I'd like to synthesize TNT," right? I'd say, "Well, that's probably not the best thing to do. So let's try to come up with another project that could mirror the reactions that you would use to make TNT, or let's try to figure out why you're interested in making TNT." So I try to rather than block them, work with them. Okay. I would say in most cases, it depends on their motivation, right? Right. If their motivation is to blow up Founders Hall, then I'd probably try to contact somebody else to get them mental help or something. But one thing that's always kind of frustrated me about chemistry is the level of competition that exists in the sciences. In some sciences, some instances, in sciences, it can be very, very cutthroat. In that, the motivation to publish your results and to get good results has kind of created a level of scientific dishonesty at all levels, right? At all, by all players. And so, you can see grad students being dishonest about their results just because if they're not, right, their PI is not going to let them graduate. And so there's a lot of pressure on a grad student to have good experimental results, because if those experimental results are not up to the level that their advisor wants, then that's too bad for the grad student. And I think there's such pressure to get good results, to get the best results, and to get better results than the guy who did it before, that it's really created a level of dishonesty that's not good for the science. At the university level, that's kind of the most competitive level. If you don't get money, you don't get tenure, and you don't get to continue your career, and that's a big deal, right? When you get hired somewhere, you have 6 years or fewer to show that you're worth what they're paying you or what they hired you for, and yeah, I don't think I don't think that's good, because in a way you don't have to be good, right? You have to be better than everybody else. You have to be better than the person you replaced, or you have to be better than people at other schools. And so there's this emphasis on always being better, and always doing better than somebody else. Well, it's one of two things. There's either an ever-decreasing pot of money for the same amount of people, or an ever-increasing field of chemists for a static pot of money, right? And so the competition keeps getting greater and greater. And so if the money can grow linearly with the number of chemists or a number of researchers, then that's good. And so, when the resources start getting scarce, then the players become much more cutthroat, much more competitive. So I think maintaining a reasonable level of scientific funding is good. So the other thing is that the field is always evolving, and so. Organic chemistry now is not what it used to be 30 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever, right? There are different technologies that are coming out that are being seen as more important the older technologies. And so the scientists also have to evolve, right? They have to kind of stay current with their field, stay current with the new technologies that are coming out. I've encountered a number of people who are friends who, I've had conversations with them about other chemists or things that have been published, and they'll say, "Oh, that's that shit work. That shouldn't have been published," or don't they realize that this is something like this has already been done before? And I think that can be really damaging to the field, because any movement forward, no matter how small, is good, right? It gives us a new perspective or some new information about how the chemistry works, how it functions. So it gives us new knowledge. And to say that something is bad, I don't know if that's right. I think it's more of a and they weren't necessarily knocking the chemistry as much as they were criticizing the people, which I think demonstrates their competitive side. And I mean, that's just not, to me anyway, that's not the type of person I am. I mean, I think you can criticize the personalities of people, because there are certainly chemists that I've encountered who have given presentations who I don't agree with their style of presentation, right? I don't agree with the way that they they brag about their chemistry, or they brag about their results. I just don't think that's right. But it's not necessarily a criticism of their chemistry or of their science. It's more of a criticism of their personality, right? Their communication skills. So I think you have to be very, very careful or very particular about what you're criticizing or what you're promoting. I think that the biggest change we need to affect politically is to have campaign finance reform. I think money and politics have become too involved with one another, and I think there's politicians, congressmen, and senators, right, and even presidents, when you look at their at the amount of money that they spend on election and re-election campaigns, it's huge, right? It's a ton of money that's going into these campaigns, and there's such an emphasis and a motivation to win these campaigns that the people we are electing to make decisions and to help run our country are spending much of their time campaigning and trying to get reelected, and so the focus has shifted away from making decisions that benefit our society to making decisions that get them elected or reelected. The idea of an election is to have the voter pick the candidate, and with gerrymandering, right, the candidates are kind of picking the voters, and I don't think that's good. It doesn't make sense. So I think a lot of changes need to happen politically, and a lot of changes have happened politically to get us to that point. And so this is kind of where we don't necessarily need to go back to the old, but I think we need to kind of get away from the new, or continue to evolve away from where we are now. When you file your taxes, right, you can donate $3 to the federal campaign finance fund, right? And so I think that's in a way a good way of going about things, right? Have everybody donate X amount of dollars or cents to a national campaign fund, and only that money can be used to campaign, right? That puts everybody on a level playing field. People with a lot of money and a lot of influence and a lot of power, in theory, could not direct that money, influence, and power over somebody else who doesn't necessarily have that. Any society that stays static is eventually, I think, going to fail. So there are lots of changes that are going to happen in the United States, and lots of changes that I think need to happen to our country.